समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Donald Trump is in Beijing, actually on his way out now. He and Xi Jinping have been talking. They've been talking and their teams have been talking. They've been also putting out their statements. So we have the readouts. Both sides have been putting out their readouts. We will make use of these as we go along. Also from a lot of the commentary that we are reading, because the whole world is abuzz by this. Because when the two titans are there in Beijing and talking and measuring each other up, and it's also time for us to look at the state of the world. What is the state of the world? Since this is called Katta Clutter, let me try to simplify it. Let's imagine two aircraft flying through a very turbulent environment. Now, many factors might have caused the turbulence, but the environment is turbulent. Boom, boom, like this. Can you imagine? When you get on a plane, you get really scared. And you know, I tend to easily digress, but this is an interesting digression because we are talking about turbulence. So I was recording a long two-part walk the talk with the Dalai Lama in Dharamshala many years ago. And he talked about the earthquake that had come in the previous day. And he said the earthquake was a bit like turbulence hits a plane, then I get very scared. I said, you get scared when turbulence hits your plane? I get scared, I said. He said, why should I not get scared? I said, because you should think that your karma will save you. And he smiled for a moment, as sweetly as he can smile and as meaningfully as he can smile. And he said, but my karma was not able to save Tibet. That was a little digression, but an interesting story, no? Nevertheless, we come back to this world with turbulence. Everybody is scared in turbulence. Everybody is also affected. Everybody has seatbelts fastened. Nobody wants any glasses falling, stuff falling, or nobody wants to break any limbs. In these turbulent skies today, imagine two aircraft where pilots say fasten seatbelts. It's very dangerous. It's very shaky. The difference is one aircraft is much bigger than the other. It's also stronger than the other, more robust than the other. It's been around longer than the other. It's also from an older airline that has a very reliable old track record. It also has a pilot that's more than a bit reckless. This plane is America. The pilot who's a bit reckless and who thinks nothing can go wrong with this plane, that pilot also thinks he can do nothing wrong. This pilot has problems going into this pilot has no problems going into turbulence, going into cumulus nimbus clouds, dangerous clouds, water-filled clouds. Even when he sees it, also he has no problem dropping 5,000 feet or going up 5,000 feet like that. He doesn't care about how his passengers feel. This pilot also knows that my passengers are nervous as hell and maybe enjoys it. Some of them might even get hurt in the process, but he doesn't care because he believes that he is God and also that his plane is indestructible. In any case, all he is worried about is passengers in the front cabin. That's the first class. They'll be safer and more comfortable or less uncomfortable, he knows. They will suffer less from this instability. That's one pilot. The other pilot, the other aircraft, I told you, is a bit smaller, not that much smaller, but it's a bit smaller and maybe not as modern. That pilot is, however, smarter, more realistic. He has fewer passengers, but also like the first pilot, his passengers are also his loyal customers, like frequent flyers. Once you get locked into a frequent flyer plan, you stay with that airline. The first pilot thinks that all these loyal frequent flyer customers have nowhere else to go. They will stay with me one way or the other. The other one says that, look, I have a few who are my loyal customers or my loyal partners or maybe stakeholders. I will carry them along. There are some others who might be dependent on me, but at the same time, I am sensible. I think my plane still has to become stronger, or I have to get more experience, or I have to develop still stronger planes because this turbulence will end someday. So I am not taking these chances. I am avoiding the most difficult parts of this weather. I'm going around it. I'm avoiding the bad clouds and making sure that my plane is actually safe, and making sure also that I do not take any risks. And next, my passengers actually feel protected and comfortable. These two planes, this turbulence is today's geopolitics. A bit of a long explanation, but I thought this was deserved. We are living in a turbulent world. It's the most turbulent phase in history in the past 50 years, or maybe longer than 50 years. I would say the most turbulent phase since the end of the Cold War. Last few years of the Cold War also were not this troublesome. In this situation, in this turbulence, the first plane, the big plane with the Cavalier pilot, as you can imagine, is the American plane. The plane is America. The pilot is Donald Trump. The second plane, the smaller plane, is China. The pilot is Xi Jinping. That is exactly what's happening to the world right now. And this is what's playing out in the summit meeting in Beijing as well, because Trump has gone there with 30 of his top CEOs. That is his front cabin, his first class cabin in his plane. The safety and comfort of these 30 he is watching. All the rest, that is all his European allies, all his Asian allies, that includes Japan, South Korea, and a bit further south, or more than a bit further south, Australia. All those are passengers on his plane that he doesn't care so much about, because he knows they are dependent on him. They have nowhere to go. They can be rolling left to right while he goes through his own shenanigans, enjoys himself. And these also include poor Taiwan. And Taiwan has been key to this summit. We'll come to that in a minute. Xi Jinping, on the other hand, has what? He has Russia, he has Pakistan, he has North Korea. These are his three stakeholders, stakeholder allies, not just passengers. These are also nuclear weapon powers. Although each one's nuclear weapon will not come to China's aid, nor does China need any help. Then he has Iran, which has often been a near nuclear weapon power, but that power is currently keeping America off balance. And then there is Iran, which has often been a near nuclear weapon power. Right now, it's not close to becoming a nuclear weapon power, but just that intention is currently keeping America off balance. Again, Russia is keeping America off balance by threatening Europe, because Trump's America doesn't want to underwrite the defense of Europe. Europe is scared because of the war in Ukraine, and because Europe is scared and Trump is not only not helping them, but one, asking them to pay for their defense, and second, has just withdrawn 5,000 of his troops from Germany. His partners are scared. These are the most scared passengers on his plane. Europe, by spending the money, is continuing the fight in Ukraine. Russia is continuing the fight in Ukraine, and until that fight goes on, Europe remains insecure. And because Europe is so dependent on America, Trump can keep on giving jolts to the Europeans in particular. You can again use that aircraft flying through turbulence analogy, and sometimes he might do something just to get some special pleasure out of the Europeans. Now, Europeans is one thing. That's been an ongoing situation with Trump ever since he came to power. In fact, even before he came to power, he had said that this war would never have taken place had I been president, and not Joe Biden, not sleepy Joe Biden, as he likes to say. In fact, that claim that the war in Ukraine would not have started had he been president, he's made, I think, about 10 times as often as he has made the claim on stopping the India-Pakistan skirmish. Of course, every time he makes that claim, the number of planes shot down keeps going up. He doesn't say whose planes, but he keeps on upping the numbers. That's Donald Trump for you. More significant is the fate of the Taiwanese. He has told the Taiwanese that, one, they have to pay for their defense. He's been defending them for too long, or America has been defending them for too long, although America is both bound by its strategic interests and also its law to defend Taiwan. But Trump doesn't care about any of that. He wants to be paid for this. Second, he accuses Taiwan that they've taken the chip technology away from America. thereby they've become rivals to America. Third, that they have to invest in America. So these are the passengers on Trump's plane who is pushing around, and they are frustrated and angry. Think of India. Where does India belong? India belongs in the Quad. India is not an ally of the Americans. Ally is not an expression that any serious Indian uses or Indian leader uses about India's relationship with America. The most they would say is strategic partners, close strategic partners, indispensable strategic partners, but ally no, because the term ally has a meaning. It's the Americans, particularly under Trump, who've been using the expression ally for India. India is the only non-ally partner in the Quad, but India has been watching the slow destruction of Quad, at least the slow, hopefully temporary destruction of Quad. It was never formally meant to be a security alliance, but it still had sufficient stuff built into it whereby this could aid the security of the four powers who were signatories to it in the vast Indo-Pacific, where India is the biggest stakeholder. The passengers on Xi Jinping's plane, on the other hand, also depend on him as much as Trump's do. In fact, a lot more. All three dependents, that is Russia, Pakistan and North Korea, have different levels of dependency. I would say it's the greatest in the case of North Korea because they depend on China for everything, from food to technology to overall protection and also diplomatic protection. That's one, and also the regime for its stability and its survival depends on China. North Korea is the ultimate client state. Second most dependent on China is Pakistan because 85% of Pakistan's weaponry comes from China now on very easy credit terms. Also, China is now nearly committed to giving Pakistan the latest of everything to match whatever India might have. China's effort, in fact, in most areas, in most critical areas, to try and keep Pakistan a little bit ahead of India. So India is then playing catch up and spending more money. When Op Sindoor happened, I had written a national interest saying that we keep talking about or preparing for a two-front war. The fact is, we've just seen our first two-front war. For China to fight India, they don't have to fight us. They don't have to fight India directly. They can fight India through Pakistan. That's what they had done the last time. In fact, now their claims have also come out in public that their engineers, experts were present with the Pakistanis to help them conduct that skirmish. Also that their satellites were available round the clock to help the Pakistanis. Satellites and ISR resources, that is intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance resources. All of that was available to Pakistan. So Pakistan to that extent is very dependent. It's also dependent economically. Most of its infrastructure is being built with China's help. It has enormous amounts of debt from China, plus the ongoing CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. So Pakistan is also a client state at a level a little bit lower than that of North Korea. And then Russia. Russia is the least dependent but still dependent because for Russia, China is the biggest market for the one thing the Russians can export, which is oil. Because the Chinese don't bother about anybody's sanctions, and also China and Russia share a long border and they have land pipelines through which hydrocarbons come into China. And also Russians have a lot that they can buy from China, from car to silicon chips to sensitive electronics. All of that comes in from China. In fact, India also has to increasingly worry that weaponry India buys from China, does it come embedded with any Chinese chips or technologies? Because suddenly you might find that a weapon system that you have and an electronic brains made anywhere can also be controlled from there. These are the three key elements there. Then the Chinese have Iran, which is dependent on China. One, because China has been buying their oil, not bothering about America's sanctions. And second, China is also willing to sell a lot of softer defense technology. They will not sell them missiles, but they will sell them stuff that goes inside the missiles and inside their drones, etc. That's how the Iranians are very dependent on the Chinese as well. And then the Chinese think that they have a lot of the global south. So once again, I'm now mixing metaphors. See it as a game of cards. In this game of cards, there are two aces. One is the existing old ace, that is America. The second is China. One has his own cards to follow him in his color, some in his color, some not quite in his color. The other one has his own cards, but also a whole pack of jokers. And that pack of jokers, I say that with no insult to anybody, that is what is called as the Global South. Now, Global South is a lot of countries, a lot of them in Africa, Southern America, which the US sees as its own sphere of influence. But in these countries, the Chinese have already signed up very extensive contracts under the Belt and Road Initiative with 32 of these countries. Those are the fellow travelers with the Chinese, and that is where China wants to reassert its leadership. While the Chinese are trying to build their new alliances and strengthen them, Trump is busy burning up his alliances. He burnt up NATO to begin with, then the Quad more or less, and then he's been insulting and humiliating all his friends. This suits China beautifully, and that's the reason China thinks that Trump is weakening America and China is becoming stronger and they're catching up with America. That has consequences, and I will come to that. However, see Trump's America purely in the context of the Quad. Trump has not spoken about the Quad. He has not said he'll come for the Quad summit, which has been overdue. His current approach is, and this is playing out in this summit as well, that he doesn't need any allies, that America doesn't need any allies. America is big enough by itself. It's also big enough markets. It has the technology to tower over the rest of the world. He's not bothered about even the old Western alliance. He's not mentioning NATO. He's obviously then not mentioning South China Sea, Japan, South Korea, Philippines, Indonesia, nothing. He's not even talking about Taiwan himself. In fact, in the American readout, Taiwan is not even mentioned. It's the Chinese who are talking about Taiwan. Trump is there purely on transactional basis. The Chinese are looking at their larger strategic interest. We are still looking at the big picture. How does Xi Jinping looks after China's strategic interest and furthers it while Trump is weakening America's? Look at his allies and friends. All of them are doing their stuff. Russia is keeping America off balance in Europe, in the Western world. That has weakened the Western alliance completely. Almost entirely Trump's fault. But Russia is playing its role. Iran is refusing to concede defeat to Trump. And in that situation, as long as Iran refuses to concede defeat, it is not victory for America. And what is not victory for America, which is an enormously bigger power than Iran, is actually a defeat for it. And Trump is chafing. He wants a way out of there, but he wants a way out while he's able to declare victory in Iran. That's why the American readout talks about the Strait of Hormuz and says that both Xi Jinping and Trump are committed to keeping the Strait of Hormuz open, and Xi Jinping also remains fully committed to the idea of not militarizing this strait. Militarizing means by Iran or Iran imposing any tolls for any passage through the Strait of Hormuz. Also, the American readout says that Xi Jinping is fully committed to the idea that Iran should never have nuclear weapons. The Chinese readout has said nothing of the sort. Once again, what this underlines is that at this summit, the two sides are unequal. This is a summit of unequals. And in this one, the less equal side is the American side, because the American side has expectations from the Chinese. Americans want China to restrain Iran or to persuade Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz without Americans having to return to war, which inevitably they will if they have to, but they don't want to. They'll do it only if they have no choice. But they definitely don't want to. That's why they need China's help. They also need the Chinese to come and invest in America. They want the Chinese to buy their farm produce. Remember, America exports 20% of all its farm produce. That is about $171 billion at last count. It's a lot of export from America. America also imports a lot of farm goods. So in fact, net, America has a trade deficit of $37 billion just on farm goods. If China stopped buying American corn, for example, or American soybean, for example, American farmers will be in real trouble, and farmers are a very strong political lobby. China owns more than 50% of all of the world's pigs. The cattle feed for them consists of corn for calories and soybean for protein. China is the biggest buyer of soybean in the world. America is the biggest manufacturer and exporter. So Trump wants China to keep buying that. China has the buyer's power. Trump is also now talking gently with China to control the flow of fentanyl and its intermediates. And now it's a new one. All this while you thought America wanted, or Trump's America wanted Chinese to get out of their businesses. Now he wants Chinese to come and invest in America, although in non-sensitive businesses. He also wants to address the issues of Chinese rare minerals or Chinese tactics of using the supply of rare metals and magnets to squeeze America or to restrain America's behavior. Now all the aggression with which Trump used to speak earlier is gone. This, in fact, had started earlier in 2025. Initially, the US State Department put out their country documents where they said, for example, that this was in fact the State Department fact sheet, where they said they don't want any side on Taiwan to change the status quo by using force. Then they took down that fact sheet, and that showed already, and this was the first indication that Trump administration wanted to avoid confrontation with America, least of all over Taiwan. Now, to summarize this summit, let's look at three heads. Three distinct heads are: one, the Taiwan debate. You know the old saying, if you are not on the table, you are on the menu. Taiwan was not on the table, so surely Taiwan was on the menu. American readout does not talk about Taiwan. The Taiwanese have issued a statement. The Chinese statement talks strongly about Taiwan. And that's how this debate has come in. The Chinese statement that talks about Taiwan says that Taiwan has the potential of really ruining American relationship, also leading to conflict, etc. The Chinese and the Taiwanese have posited it differently and in very sharp contrast with each other. The Chinese have linked the Taiwan question, that is the Taiwanese reunification with China, that is how it's translated, to peace and stability. The Taiwanese are using the expression freedom and democracy because they are saying we are fighting for freedom and democracy, we are a free society, we are a democracy. PRC is not. That is, Beijing's China is not. We are a democracy. They are not. Now look at the Chinese statement. Americans have been quiet, but the Chinese statement, their readouts and their spokesperson. And I quote, Taiwan is the most important issue. Otherwise, the two countries will have large clashes, even conflicts, putting the entire relationship in jeopardy. Again, I continue quoting Taiwan independence. And this is the line that everybody has repeated from the Chinese side. Taiwan independence and cross-strait peace. Cross-strait is the strait between mainland China and Taiwan. They are as reconcilable as fire and water. Safeguarding peace and stability from the Taiwan Strait is the biggest common denominator in China and US relationship. The US side must exercise extra caution in handling the Taiwan question. The Taiwanese foreign minister has responded to this. Beijing is the risk to peace and stability. I told you, Beijing is the risk to peace and stability. Taiwan continues to work with the US and other democracies to uphold freedom and democracy. That's the reason I said this has been posited as peace and stability versus freedom and democracy. The second thing is Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. That I've told you about already. China also has an interest in the Strait of Hormuz opening because they get a lot of their fuel from there. They can't make do with only what they get from Russia. They get a lot of it from there. They have strategic interests in the Gulf. They have friendly relationships with all of the GCC countries, but they have very friendly relationship with Iran. They do not want Iran to suffer or to be destroyed. So they have an interest, and that's been a key issue also. The third key issue is something that's really in American strategic debate. It's been central to American strategic debate, but this time Xi Jinping has picked it up. So he's played the game of jujutsu. Okay, he's from China. I'm using an analogy from a Japanese martial art, but jujutsu is when you use your adversary's strength against them. So he's used the expression Thucydides Trap. And he said that America and China must avoid falling into the Thucydides Trap. What is the Thucydides Trap? I had talked about this in an earlier episode of Karta Clutter in detail. I will share a link with you. You can see that this is something that Thucydides, who was a 5th century BCE, I think 411th century BCE, Greek historian, intellectual, and general, he had thought of an idea that when one hegemon, one dominant power is challenged by another, when a strong power keeps rising in such a way that it will threaten the reigning hegemon. The reigning hegemon or the superpower, in this case you can say America, the sole superpower, when the other one comes close to challenging it, then a war between them becomes inevitable. Where did this come from? This came in 5th century BC. This came from the Sparta and Athens situation. Sparta was that hegemon. It was the biggest power, the greatest power in that entire region. Then Athens began to rise, and that's when Thucydides wrote that now a war is inevitable. And that war did take place. That's the famous Sparta versus Athens war that history books talk about and on which many movies have been made. Much later, in fact, a couple of decades back, Graham T. Allison is a professor at Harvard Kennedy School. He's now 86. He wrote a book called Destined for War. And in that book, he coined the expression Thucydides Trap. Again, the idea was that China was now rising, America was the sole superpower, and soon enough the two countries may get caught in the Thucydides Trap, which means war will become inevitable. This time, Xi Jinping has turned the tables and he's using this theory to the Americans, to Donald Trump in this case. And why? Because he thinks Trump is now making America weaker, and this is also when he can create negotiating space and create some kind of a moral and strategic superiority or dominance over Donald Trump. I told you about Graham Allison. I also keep telling you a reporter's life is interesting. Some things make our lives interesting. So see this picture. This year at Davos, I just happened to be on the same table as he. He's now 86. His mind is very sharp. He made the sharpest interventions and made the most interesting points. I wish we could reach out to him now and maybe set up an interview for you. I will try and do that.